You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
All right, we are live. We're going to let this stream breathe just for a second. Make sure we're nice and stable, coming through clean and clearly for you, our great viewers and listeners out there in Broncos country. Welcome in. This is another episode of Dove Valley Deep Divers, presented, as always, by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. You guys aren't used to seeing me. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, hosting Dove Valley Deep Divers. You're used to seeing Lance Sanderson, but Lance has a few things going on, and so these last 2 days, Friday and Saturday, Erick's been kind enough to let me join him on these podcasts, and last night was a phenomenal conversation, not only with you and Nick Kendall, Erick, but with our great listeners. It was, time just flew by. How you doing today, my friend?
Doing pretty good and super excited to be on this, as I always am, man. Been looking forward to this all day, as I do every single day. Just love talking about the Broncos. And basically with everything going on, being pent up in my apartment with my wife, who's not that big of a football fan, just don't have anybody to really talk about football, which makes it even more exciting to be here.
Oh, yeah. And at least Saturday, the Denver Broncos served us up another transaction. We also saw a former Bronco depart to greener pastures in a literal sense. We'll talk about what that means here in just a second. And so there's plenty for us to kind of sink our teeth into as people file into the room. We want to welcome in those of you who have been hanging out in the chat room on YouTube and Facebook, but especially let's give a shout out here to Mile High 6 Sports, Kyle, the Cherries, Stu, what's up, dog? Jerry, Robert, Muhammad, even Kitty Kruger on Twitter. What's going on? Jordan, Ian. Welcome in, everybody. We're going to dive in and talk about Nick Vannett, whom the Broncos signed today at tight end, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks, a guy that I know, Erick, you did a lot of scouting on back during the lead up to the 2016 NFL draft. So Broncos fans are going to get a really good take and an educated take on what this kid brings to the table. I guess he's not a kid, 27 years old. We're going to dive into that, guys. First things first, though, make sure you're following Dove Valley Deep Divers on Twitter at DVDD_pod. Easy to do. And while you're at it, make sure you also follow the main mother account at Mile High Huddle. That you stay plugged into all things Broncos, breaking news and analysis in real time. And then you can see here where to follow Erick at Erick Trickel and myself at Chad and Jensen. And then, guys, when you get a second, head on over to huddleuppod.com, not to be confused with Huddle Up Podcast. Huddleuppod.com. I'll put the link in the stream here, but that's where our merch store is. You want to get one of these hats, you want to get a shirt, you want to get a hoodie. There's all kinds of swag on there. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, there's something for you. It's a great organic way to not only show your fanhood of the Denver Broncos, but also to support Mile High Huddle and what we do on these podcasts each and every day. So take care of that business when you get some time. I just put the link in the stream.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, Erick. The Denver Broncos signed Nick Vannett today. 2 years. Mike Kliss reported of 9 News, $5.7 million. He's basically going to get 3 of that in 2020 and 2.7 next year. First things first, what was your gut reaction to the transaction?
So my first reaction was, as much work as I did on Nick Vannett, as much as I liked him coming out of college, I haven't seen the development that I wanted to see, and I wasn't a fan of it. And part of that is just the lack of tight end usage that we see in the Pat Shurmur offense, with having Jeff Heuerman, Jake Butt, Austin Fort, and all these guys, as well as having, Noah Fant, of course. Just, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but then I got to sit down and just start thinking about it a little bit more. And basically with how Denver's paying him is they can go and they can cut Jeff Heuerman now, and they actually come out ahead in terms of cap space instead of where they were at beforehand. So I don't think they do cut Jeff Heuerman, at least until training camp. I think there's going to be a battle there, but that's definitely an option for them to add some additional cap space down the road.
What do you say to those who basically reduce Nick Vannett to nothing more than a blocker. You look at what he did last year in Pittsburgh, 17 receptions, 166 yards. Everybody's yawning, hearing those stats as I say them. But I'm told that the Broncos view him as more than just a blocker, even though, again, he'll be playing second fiddle at best to Noah Fant. What's your take on that aspect of it?
I think that just viewing him as just a blocker isn't really fair to him, because that's not what he is. I mean, he's a little bit worse of a blocker than Jeff Heuerman is, but he does offer up a lot more as a pass catcher. And mainly because of his size and athleticism, he uses his size exceptionally well. I mean, he's 6'6", 247, 250 pounds, somewhere around there. And he uses that size to its max to box out defenders and go get catches. So, well, you have Noah Fant, you have Cortland Sutton, you have potentially another receiver, maybe Henry Ruggs or somebody else. You have the running backs all taking attention. Nick Vannett can really shine in a limited role in this offense as a pass catcher because of that size that he brings and his ability after the catch as well. He's not just a blocker. He's not going to be used as just a blocker. He's going to be a complement piece to Noah Fant, which Denver really did need to upgrade there over Jeff Heuerman with somebody that has more potential. Jeff Heuerman basically kind of maxed out, and all the injuries and stuff like that are a concern. So it's a good move. He's just not just a blocker, though.
I remember when the Broncos made that pick of Jeff Heuerman, third round, the year before Vannett entered the league with the Seahawks as a third-round pick, both of them third-round picks. With Heuerman, we were all like, why are you taking this dude in the third round, maybe the fifth, probably the sixth? Like, if the Broncos don't take Jeff Heuerman where they did in the third round, he's probably lasting till early day 3. And so you worry about the value and them reaching, and then he tears his ACL in rookie minicamp and you don't see him until the next season. And I was surprised, frankly, Eric. I know, actually, now that I think about it, I can't recall what your reaction was, but I've always been surprised when the Denver Broncos re-signed him. He's playing on a second contract now. And as you said, I ran the numbers looking at this, the $3 million this year for Nick Vannett. Of course, that's what he's going to make on his 2-year, $5.7 million deal. The Broncos can cut Jeff Heuerman and save $3.8 million on the salary cap, according to Over the Cap. So as you were saying, they could end up actually giving themselves more room than they did before they started with Nick Vannett, except it also would involve getting rid of Jeff Heuerman, who is technically your most experienced tight end on the roster.
Yeah, and I wasn't a big fan of Jeff Heuerman. I thought that Nick Vannett was definitely better of him. I was actually while you were talking, I was trying to find where I actually graded Nick Vannett at, but I just can't find his name on my 2017 board. But yeah, he does. And one thing to note about his contract is that there was a lot of confusion by Mike Klitz's tweet. Well, he is getting $3 million this year. $1.75 million of that is a signing bonus, which is going to be split up over the 2 years. So his actual cap hit for the first year is just a little bit over $2 million, 2.1-ish, something like that. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. So that's increasing. That's making it even more money that Denver would be saving if they cut Jeff Heuerman, which just makes this move a little bit better. But as for Jeff Heuerman, I wasn't a fan of that pick. I thought that he was a day 4 or round 4, round 5 guy, early day 3, basically, right. And just very questionable about it. I mean, I thought his upside was limited. I thought that, he would be a solid blocker. That wasn't going to be his strong suit, which he has proved me wrong there. That actually is his strong suit. Just doesn't offer up what I thought he would as a pass catcher. So It's funny how that works out a little bit.
Mr. Alligator Arms himself, right? Jeff Heuerman. Stu jumps in on Super Chat with a $10 donation, taking his place on Mile High Huddles, Mount Rushmore, as always. We love you, Stu. Appreciate you, my friend. And he's as surprised as we were. I mean, I didn't see this coming, to be honest with you guys. I could have seen a Jeff Heuerman move coming, but Heuerman's still on the roster. I didn't expect this to happen. And I think Stu has a really good point there, Eric, that, you can argue that there's a logjam at tight end for this team before Vannett showed up, because let's just list them real quick. Noah Fant, 2019 first-round pick. Jeff Heuerman, we've already talked plenty about him. Austin Fort injured, Jake Butt injured. You got Andrew Beck coming back, and then Bug Howard. Yeah, you got 2 of those guys whose future is uncertain in terms of their recovery off of injury last year. To me, this speaks to, honestly, this is a bad omen for Jeff Heuerman, and I think it's also their way of kind of hedging, because I don't think they expect Jake Butt to ever bounce back from those knees.
I definitely agree there. And not just Jake Butt. I think Troy Fumagalli is another one who's going to be taking notice by this, because last year, Austin Fort, before his injury, he was set to make this roster. I heard that very reliably from multiple people that Austin Fort had played his way onto the roster, and he got hurt in the second game that they played of the 5?
Seahawks game, yeah, I think that was the second.
And so he made a strong impression through training camp and just that first game to make the roster, and then he gets hurt, and they still have a lot of hope for him. So it's going to be interesting to see how this tight end position pans out. But I definitely think, as you said, Jake Butt's on notice, Jeff Heuerman's on notice, and Troy Fumagalli as well.
I see some super chats stacking up, but there's a couple of questions here that I want to grab because they do involve the news of the day. Jacob on YouTube says, Mike Kliss tweeted out saying the Broncos are done. Are they really planning on going into the draft with holes at cornerback and defensive line? And yeah, guys, if you missed it, basically what Kliss said is with the trades and the acquisitions they've made and a couple of re-signings and the tenders they've rendered, they're hitting pause, according to Mike Kliss. The John Elway group is hitting pause. But, Eric, we were just talking about this before we went live. Neither one of us see that as being a black and white issue. Like maybe there's nothing imminent coming in today, but there are still some serious gaps on this roster that John Elway, frankly, as a GM, can't be comfortable with heading into the draft.
Yeah, and one thing too in Mike Kliss's tweet is that he does mention that they will be looking at a couple signings here and there throughout the offseason as they round out their depth, which is something exactly lining in with what I've heard. Basically, not to expect any more signings or any more big moves. So that's going to be like taking off any potential big trades coming up, maybe a trade for a depth guy. But I don't think it takes Prince Amukamara off the table. He's a guy who might be a guy just wanting to wait a little bit, see how things happen, and then sign later. I know there's a lot of interest between Denver and Prince Amukamara's side about reuniting basically with Vic Fangio. So that's something to keep an eye on. I don't think they're done. And we all know that John Elway isn't a guy who likes to go into the draft with needs. I mean, there's still a need that they could use another depth defensive end, another corner, maybe 2, a cover linebacker option, and then a potential swing tackle. At least maybe a receiver in there as well. And I would expect Denver to add at least a couple cheap free agents there between now and the draft just to round out the depth chart.
Our friend James jumps in on YouTube. He says, Will Parks getting $1.6 million makes me so sad, but I'm happy for him. He returns home and can push for a starting role in Philly. However, Nick Corte's cancellation chart has a non-qualifying free agent addition. And yeah, I mean, that's the other piece of news today is the Broncos allowed Will Parks to test the market. That he received quite a bit of interest. And from what I've been told, Eric, he actually took a little bit less money to go home. He's from Philly. His social media handle, Philly Will, right? He wanted to go home, but also he felt like his odds of giving a chance to start was better in Philadelphia playing for the Eagles. So greener pastures in a literal sense. And, he was a guy that was a great locker room guy, somewhat of a failure to launch in Denver. He and Justin Simmons came in the same year, separated by 3 rounds in the draft. And you saw Simmons skyrocket, kind of level off. And then when Fangio came, hit another peak, right? He hit another swell. Whereas Will Parks kind of went up a little bit, and then he's been plateaued basically for the last 3 years. So I think the Broncos, recognizing that, said, well, if you can we don't see you as anything more currently than a number 3 safety at best. And that's not a starting job, as we know. They play a lot of ball, but big nickel is not something necessarily they roll with snap in, snap out. So they let him hit the bricks. But what was your thought on Will Parks taking that $1.6 million 1-year deal to sign with Philly?
Now, I've made no bones about it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Will Parks when they drafted him or his play throughout. I always thought that he was a little bit overrated by fans, but I'm actually happy for him. He did take a little bit less. There were multiple teams interested in him, but the issue was does he take the money and not get a starting chance, or does he take a lot less money and get a chance to start? That's kind of where the issue was with his market. And he decided that he'd rather return home, take less money, and get the chance to start and basically hit free agency again next year. Maybe he can turn this year into a tremendous year and then get big bucks next year. So it was a smart move by him, I think. I definitely think that the Jim Schwartz scheme is a much better fit for him than Vic Fangio's scheme. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And he doesn't, and unfortunately, because of the new rules in place with the compensatory pick formula, in order to qualify, you have to have a annual average of about $2.5 million. So there's some questions about if Jeff Driscoll will actually qualify, because it's not exactly 2.5. So there's some concerns there. But right now with this, Denver is already over the compensatory pick formula with Graham Glasgow, because they have the Nick Vannett qualifies, Jeff Driscoll right now is qualifying, and then I can't remember who the other one is.
Well, do re-signings count in the formula?
Melvin Gordon was the 4. So that's right now who Nick Corte has as the 4 signings that they have. And right now they've only lost Chris Harris, who qualified, and Connor McGovern qualified, which canceled out 2 of them. So I heard a lot that they would play for the compensatory picks in 2021, but right now, unless, say, Jeremiah Tauchu signs for a big surprising deal, I wouldn't be expecting Denver to be looking at more than 1 compensatory pick. Shelby Harris and Derek Wolf would likely cancel out the other 2.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Mike Evans jumps in with a $2 donation on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Mike. He says, will we get a pass coverage linebacker in the draft? Eric, all the top coverage linebackers, I say that in air quotes, in this free agent class got swooped up within the first 72 hours from the time legal tampering opened to basically day 3 of that week, Wednesday, which was day 1 of the new league year. You saw Nate Kwiatkowski get picked up. You saw Joe Schobert get picked up, and you saw Corey Littleton get signed. Is there anyone out there still available that you view as a coverage linebacker that could feasibly serve in that role and upgrade the depth? Or is this something that they're cruising for, filling this need in the draft?
Off the top of my head, there's no one out there that really would be an upgrade to the coverage unit of it. I mean, upgrade over Josie Jewell, sure. But do you really want to go that route in free agency at this point? That's a kind of a question here. I think that the draft is what they're looking at. And I think that another option for the Broncos, and it's something that goes in line with something that Vic Fangio said at the Combine, is using more defensive backs to help cover the issues of coverage from the linebackers. So we could look at Denver going and getting a couple more defensive backs to help out there as well. But guys like Akeem Davis-Gaither, Troy Dye, Cameron Brown a little bit later. I mean, everybody knows about Isaiah Simmons, Kenneth Murray, Patrick Queen. I mean, the names go on and on. There's plenty of options for coverage guys at linebacker in the draft. Couple guys that really fit the scheme at safety that can come down and play that coverage linebacker type role as well. So they definitely have their options in the draft if that's the way that they decide to go.
James Dean, one of our Super Chat superstars, supporting Mile High Huddle like a boss, jumps in, $5 donation. Appreciate you, James. So consistent, my friend. We really do appreciate you. He says, I'm getting upset. Why are we not getting Prince or another corner? That's where our need is, and the defensive line. Or do you think they'll draft one? And if so, who? One other name that got added to that, and again, thank you, James. One new name that got added to a list of potential candidates for the Broncos is Pierre Desser, who was released today. I think it was Saturday, early Saturday. Do you see him as a potential scheme fit? And then, speak to what James is asking there about whether or not in the draft, if there's a D lineman or which D lineman you like for Denver.
There's actually multiple corners that can fit for the Broncos, but it's all going to come down to cost at this point. I think that they're looking for a little bit cheaper. And the draft is actually pretty solid for cornerbacks. I mean, it's not as top heavy with, you have Jeffrey Okudah out of Ohio State, and then it's a mixed bag after him. But, it's got good depth, so they could look to go that way. Defensive line is a little bit rougher because there is some good talent at the top, but it's not lacking great depth. And most of the talent there will likely be going by round 3. So if Denver wants to go defensive line, they've got to go there earlier. And will they want to invest on that after investing a 3rd-round pick on Draymond Jones and then trading for Jarrell Casey and his contract, and then bringing back Mike Purcell, of course. That's right now, that's your 3 starting defensive linemen. So I think that they will look at the draft as for defensive line. Cornerback, I think that they will ultimately add one in free agency prior to it and still add another one in corner. There has been some word going around that they might be looking at moving Isaac Yiadom to safety, as well as Duke Dawson making his switch from cornerback to safety that they started last year.
I could see that, and it might take a lot of pressure off of Yiadom because he's so physical and he's a sound tackler. And he's a great character guy, and even though you see those grabby, lack of awareness type of fouls on him as a corner, he does have high football IQ. It's uncharacteristic based on what you see. It's kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of a contradiction because he is super smart and he's a high character guy, and then you see him make dumb type of plays on the field. And I think part of that, Eric, is just simply he's not cut out to play corner at the NFL level, but you move him back to a safety role where he can use his eyes and not be so easily baited and use that physicality and come up and support. I think there could be a new life for him. Duke Dawson, honestly, since the Broncos acquired him via trade on the doorstep of last season from New England, I've not seen him do one thing up to this point in a Broncos uniform that made me sit up and go, okay, now we're cooking, now we're talking. By the way, Terry jumps in with a $2 donation. Agree, JD. I'm not sure what you're agreeing to, but we do thank you for that donation, Terry. And is that normal, Terry? Because you got a different – oh, it is. Yeah, you changed it. I see. Up there in Canada, proven as always, Broncos country is not a geographic location. It is a hashtag state of being. What do you think is going to happen with Shelby Harris? Because the longer he's kind of held out and as picky as he's seemingly being, because there has been interest in him from what I've heard, but he's kind of waited and not taken some of these opportunities that have come his way. I'm thinking, Eric, he's going to end up having to take an even significantly lesser deal than he was expecting going into free agency, but something similar to what Shaq Barrett accepted from Tampa last year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, part of the reason with the issue with Shelby Harris is that basically he shut the door on Denver. There were some issues there going on behind the scenes with it. Some of it kind of leaked out a little bit, but not a whole lot. Not all the full details are out there with going on with that. But he doesn't seem likely to return. He's being very picky about what he wants in his contract, how he wants his contract structured, which more power to the players. I'm all fine with that. But he's just right now, he's just hurting himself with it. I mean, I've heard as many as 10 teams have expressed interest with him, with a good portion of them submitting contract offers or at least wanting to submit contract offers, and him just basically shutting him down. The Colts were expected to be big spenders on him, but basically I think that's where he really wanted to go, which is one reason too. But once they got DeForest Buckner in that trade, they're out on that market. So he's kind of having to step back, reevaluate where he wants to go. I think I really think that's where he thought he was going to end up. And I thought he was going to get, and at least he thought he was going to get a huge contract from them in that 13, 14 million average per year basis that was going around. But now it might be that 5, 6, maybe even 7 million at most for him for a 1-year deal.
Yeah. In my opinion, Shelby Harris is nowhere near worth double-digit millions. And, I mean, I think that's pushing it personally, even $6 or $7 million bucks. Like, I don't know, he finally we're talking about a guy who has 1 year under his belt in the NFL as a starter. And in Fangio's scheme, he was solid, but I wouldn't say he was transcendent. I mean, we're not talking about the second coming of Calais Campbell here. I mean, obviously different size and different skill set and all that, but I'm talking as a 5-tech defensive end. He did not – I mean, he makes plays. The one thing I'll say about Shelby Harris before anyone thinks I'm sitting here trashing him, that's not what I mean to do here. The one thing I'll say about Shelby Harris is he has that clutch gene, man. When the chips are down and his team needs a play, he's one of those guys that has that rare ability to affect his environment and to make something happen, whether it's intercepting Big Ben in the end zone, whether it's tipping a pass, blocking a kick, whatever. And that's, it's hard to put a price tag on how valuable that is. But when you're going from, you got 70, 80 snaps, whatever it is in a game, and he's only impacting a small fraction of that, you got to start wondering what the value is. I'm still more about, Eric, based on Shelby Harris's inconsistencies. And again, the door's already been slammed basically on him coming back to Denver anyway. But I'm still all about seeing what we can do. If I'm John Elway, Derek Wolf's behind's been blown in the wind all week now. I'm seeing what I can do to get him back in the saddle, even if it's just a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that one thing with Shelby Harris, too, is that all of Broncos country should actually be mad at him for batting down that pass against the Oakland Raiders. They had a chance to win that game, and that batted pass was the difference of basically having a really good shot at Henry Ruggs at 10 to now potentially having to trade up and giving up another third-round pick to 11 to get to 10, 11, or something like that to go get Henry Ruggs. They could have been in position to strike at Isaiah Simmons or Derek Brown. And now that doesn't seem likely because Shelby Harris had to go bat that pass. And I get that some fans out there, they're not okay with losing for draft position, and I can't blame them at all. But this is a team with the Broncos that they really still need a lot of help, and getting that 10th overall pick could have been a huge piece to help. I mean, if Denver had that 10th piece, there's been a lot of talk about Derek Brown falling a little bit, falling right there into that about 7, 8, 9 range, and Denver being able at that 10, able to move up, go get him. And now you're looking at a defensive line of Jarrell Casey, Derek Brown, and Draymond Jones. And that is 100 times better than what Denver fielded last year. I'm a huge fan of Derek Wolfe. I like Shelby Harris, although I thought he was a little bit overrated. And Draymond Jones was good. Mike Purcell was solid. But those three right there with Casey, Brown, and Jones is so much better.
Terry jumps back in on Super Chat. Appreciate you, my brother. He says, hey, guys, Eric, who is your ultimate 6th or 7th round flyer? Love you all, Broncos country. Stay safe. Hashtag football priest. Hashtag state of being. Terry, we appreciate you, man. So consistent, and we love your passion, and that means the world to us. Let's shift gears as Terry's talking here about late round picks. Who are some potential gems in the 6th, 7th round that you kind of have earmarked scouting this class for the Denver Broncos?
Well, one guy that I think that would be the best player to take a flyer on is Scott France. And if people aren't familiar with Scott France, he's an offensive tackle out of Kansas State. He played with Dalton Reisner. He was actually the bookend tackle, playing right tackle for them last year with Dalton Reisner. And he's played really good football. And if it wasn't for just one little thing, I think he'd be getting talked about as a top 100 player in this draft. But after seeing what happened with Michael Sam, who was openly gay, and Scott France being openly gay, I think that's going to drop his stock a lot. Might see him go undrafted. But he's a tremendous player. He's definitely worth at least getting a shot to play in the NFL. And I like him for Denver because having Dalton Reisner there, that's going to help with any kind of locker room issues that might arise with it. I mean, you have the former teammate. They're really good friends. Dalton Reisner has multiple times tweeted out about Scott France, and basically people shouldn't be caring about his sexual orientation and stuff like that. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't impact his ability to play football, and that's what comes first on the football field is the ability to play. That is one guy out there. Another would take in that range as a flyer. Another guy is Reggie Corbin. Very similar to Philip Lindsay. Stacking speed on speed is something that Nick Kendall has basically talked about a little bit at running back. Does a lot of the same things, and just right now with the uncertainty about Philip Lindsay's future, it would definitely be nice to have that ability to basically replace him with a similar player.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Here's a curious question. I've wondered this myself. Clutch TV wants to know, what is Derek Wolfe's market value since no one has picked him up? I think, Eric, that he went into this free agent period pushing for double digits, right? Pushing for $10 million because he's coming off $8, $9 million, whatever he's been averaging a year since the Broncos extended him. I think he was hoping he could get up, with inflation and the salary caps rising each and every year, even though he's just gotten older. I think he was hoping for $10 million as kind of a starting point. The NFL wasn't feeling that for a guy that's been as injured as Derek Wolfe because about the only thing you can say negative about Derek Wolfe is he does get hurt a lot. He just does. It's the elephant in the room. It's just the truth. Unfortunately, he's not maybe as injury prone as some of his most stringent detractors would say that he is, but he's just hurt too much. And that's ultimately, Eric, why he's not out there commanding 10 plus million on the open market. But what is his value? When it all gets said and done and he signs somewhere, maybe it still ends up being in Denver. What do you think that contract looks like? Because I'm still thinking it's a 1-year deal, 2-year tops. But what's the APY?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that's hurting Derek Wolfe is the NFL's reaction to COVID-19, shutting down team facilities, making it so players can't take visits. And I think that if that wasn't the case, I think Derek Wolfe would have gotten that $10, $11 million APY deal because teams would have been able to bring him in. They would have been able to have their team doctor check him out, check out the injuries, and just basically sign off on it. But they can't. And I think that that not being able to have that, being able to have the clear view about his injuries or anything like that is just hurting his value. I think that he might end up signing a 1-year, probably about $5 million deal for an average per year, $5 million deal. Yeah. Maybe 2 years and going a little bit more, about $6 million, with most of that in the second year with a team option on it, basically. Right. Something like that to give the team something to be a little bit more comfortable with him. But he got bad luck is what it is. I mean, this last year, it was bad luck when he got hurt, a play that should have been blown dead, bad luck with COVID-19, not being able to visit with teams, just things, cards didn't play out for him the way he thought it would. And I feel bad for him. He's my favorite player on the Broncos. I absolutely love him. Only player that I have the jersey of, and just tremendous. I love his story, everything. So I would really like to see Denver go and offer him just, hey, we'll have you come back 1 year. You know the scheme. We know you can play in it. We know you can perform. We have the rotation here to help keep you healthy. Give you 1 year. We'll give you $6 million to come back on this 1 year deal, and you can come play for us. You're hitting it next year. Yeah, you're a year older, but at least you're getting paid. At least you're getting a good amount of money, and so come back to us. That's what I would be doing if I was John Elway, but.
We shall see. And hopefully it does shake out that way, because you're right. I think most Broncos country share your sentiment for Derek Wolfe and have a soft spot for him. I mean, one of the very few remaining holdovers from Super Bowl 50. And he's exemplified what it means to be a Bronco. And I think everyone loves anytime Derek Wolfe gets on the radio to do an interview, or if he's standing up in front of a camera. Anytime this guy talks, you're going to get it straight. He doesn't bandy words. He's direct. Sometimes he probably uses a little too much language that the Broncos PR department is comfortable with, but they're willing to accept that because he balls out on the field. Yeah. And last year, Derek Wolfe, let's face it, of all the holdovers that were here before Vic Fangio arrived, Derek Wolfe took to that scheme better than anybody else, period, and a story. And that includes Von Miller. That includes Chris Harris. I guess you could make an argument for Justin Simmons. He and Derek Wolfe kind of, about the same in that sense. But Duke Rose jumps in, $10 donation on Super Chat, one of our superstars. Duke, appreciate you, my friend. He says, just dropping my donation in, my dogs. That means the world to us, my friend. And every little bit counts. It's good to see you. Dig that beanie also, by the way, Duke. Let's see what James has to say here as well. Jumps back in, $5 donation. Thanks, James. He says, do we have a locker room issue? Look at the players that want out of Denver. Both Harris's, Sanders, etc. It's looking like there's a locker room issue. Eric, I think more than anything, it's not so much a locker room issue. It's a people being sick and tired of losing issue. And even though you have a new fresh face in Drew Lock and a new different vibe and players who are locked in and committed to the Broncos are feeling optimistic, you do have those other people who have just been through 4 years, man. Like if you're hitting free agency right now, you've been through 4 years of some pretty dark days in Denver. I mean, the darkest 4-year period in the history of this club. And that has an effect on people. I mean, I'm of the opinion, Eric, that one of the reasons you saw Von Miller have a down year last year is he's just kind of been worn down to a nub emotionally from all the losing and all the expectations and being the star player and the wins just not coming. And I think it all took a toll on him. And that doesn't mean that there's no coming back from that if you're Von Miller, or there's no rebound or bounce back. That's not what I'm saying, but it takes its toll. It wears on guys. They, want to change the scenery. That's what it was for Emmanuel Sanders. Some of them are a little bit more vocal, and in that case, the Broncos try and get him out of there as quick as possible, like you saw Sanders get dealt. They did try to trade Chris Harris last fall and, just didn't quite get the deal they were looking for. If they're a little bit deeper at corner, though, Eric, he probably got dealt last fall if Bryce Callahan was playing football and Devontae Bosby doesn't get hurt.
I definitely agree. And I think that one thing, too, is it's not just being tired of losing. And I don't think that the Broncos have a locker room issue. I think that part of these moves are getting away what concerns they had with players in the locker room. Emmanuel Sanders, he was very vocal. I mean, he was a guy who there were some issues between him and Rick Scangarello this last season that just caused a lot of headbutting that ultimately led to him being traded. He wasn't liking his usage, things like that. Chris Harris, he had some issues with the Broncos, and his mainly stemmed from losing, trading Aqib Talib, things like that. Just didn't sit well with him, and so he there were some issues with that. I mean, and then of course the whole issue last year about his contract with what John Elway said, and I think that he was just ultimately at that point where he just been rubbed the wrong way a little bit too many times. And with Shelby Harris is that there's just some issues, some conflict there between him, and he didn't like playing at the nose, and then how they're using him as a 5-tech. It wasn't the way that he felt was best. Just issues like that, and ultimately I think that's what led to it. So, yeah.
And with Shelby Harris, again, from an impact perspective, He had a few really good games last year, but he was extremely inconsistent. One of the reasons why that defense never quite coalesced into a really consistent unit was because of some of those struggles up front. Mike Purcell, even though he did do a significantly better job at nose tackle than Shelby Harris did, was inconsistent as well down the stretch. Shelby Harris. Derek Wolfe, once he was lost in week 13, man, it was tough going for that front seven, even with Alexander Johnson, even with Von Miller, but losing Bradley Chubb as well. It all just conspired to be a really difficult situation for Vic Fangio. And, Fangio's scheme, I think you could say it's not for everybody. It's he has a very unique personality as it relates to that scheme, and it's very demanding of the players. Once a player masters it, though, it's almost like they unlock a whole new level of being, an NFL player, whatever their position is. But some guys, they resist that. They want to stick to what they like. They want to stick to what they know. Some players, they're going to disagree with the coach on what, coach says he thinks I should be doing X. I think I should be doing Y. Shelby's one of those guys. Ben jumps in with a $2 donation. Appreciate you, Ben. He says Lamar Jackson will be a steal at corner in round 3 through 6. Eric, I'm sure you've done some scouting work on Lamar Jackson. What's your take?
I really like Lamar Jackson. I'm not sure he's the best fit for the Vic Fangio scheme. And just there's a lot of teams that I've heard that they don't view him as a cornerback in the NFL. They view him as a safety. So that's something to be keeping an eye out for as well. But I really do like his play. I think that in the right scheme, he can be a tremendous player in the NFL.
Let's see what's on Desmond's mind, jumping in with a $10 donation. Thank you, Desmond. He says, what do you guys think about Melvin Gordon's payday? And do you think Lindsey should have got that money instead? And do you think he may be angry about it? Desmond, it's funny you should ask because last night's podcast of Dove Valley Deep Divers, in which I also co-hosted with Eric, on a temporary basis, it was the gut reaction to the Melvin Gordon deal. Neither one of us loved the deal. Neither one of us, well, I should say both of us think the money is skewampus. They paid too much money for a running back A. It's not so much an indictment on Melvin Gordon. It's more about the idea that in today's NFL, you shouldn't be paying that kind of money for any running back. I mean, Eric, I think there's a fair argument to be made that maybe there's 2 or 3 running backs that you could roll the dice on paying that kind of money to. I'm talking Christian McCaffrey. I'm talking Saquon Barkley. I don't know if there's anyone besides those 2 that I would be comfortable paying that money to, even on a short-term basis. So $8 million APY for Melvin Gordon over 2 years. We were both surprised by the figure, not surprised by the Broncos signing him. That had been telegraphed for a couple of weeks. But, yeah, Philip Lindsay, I mean, they're saying that the report from Mike Kliss, he's being told by Team Brass that Melvin Gordon's going to be the bell cow, rendering Philip Lindsay the, at best, 1B. So the second fiddle to Melvin Gordon. And we, like you guys, we find that a little bit repugnant. However, it's worth mentioning, he is 5'8", Philip Lindsay. He is 190 pounds. You want to keep his touch ratio somewhere between 15 to 20 touches per game. And having Melvin Gordon to pound through the tackles allows you to do that. That's the silver lining, I would say, Eric.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. Even Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley, even those are guys that I'm hesitant to pay just because of all the evidence we have about running backs, their worth, and just how devalued they get as their career goes on, largely because of how they beat up they get. Christian McCaffrey, especially so because of his usage as a primary receiver for that offense. So that's just making it even more concerning. But with Philip Lindsay paying him, I wouldn't want to give him that Melvin Gordon contract. I wouldn't want to give him more money than Austin Eckler got. And that's just because I don't view him as good as Austin Eckler. If he offered more as a receiver out of the backfield, then I'm fine giving him what Austin Eckler got. But the whole reason why Denver wanted a receiver out of the backfield is because that's not what Lindsay's game is. So, maybe a deal with about $4.5 million on an average per year basis, I'm okay with that for Lindsay. But even that's pushing my limits on it. I'm very much in the you don't pay running backs camp. And that's one reason why I'm just not a big fan of this Gordon contract and seeing the breakdown of it. And it's a lot of people are saying, oh, you can get out of it after year 1. You really can't. You're still committed to him with $4.5 million year 2. And that's just a little bit much, I think, for the Broncos to sit there and say, oh, you didn't perform this year. We're going to cut you. It just screams to me they're stuck with him.
Especially when you have a Pro Bowl incumbent at the position. It doesn't seem like good cap sense. It doesn't seem like smart roster management. And to me, it feels like a new offensive coordinator being injected into the decision-making process and Elway just kind of going along with it. You got Shermer saying, I need this guy. I want this guy. This is what I need. Yeah, it's good having Phillip. It's good having Royce as a backup, but this is the guy I need to make the engine go. Go get him for me. And Elway complied. Joey with a question. We've kind of neglected our Facebook viewers tonight, so let's grab one here on Facebook. He says, Eric, would you prefer a wide receiver in round 1 or Javon Kinlaw? Your answer.
It really always depends on how the board falls down. I mean, if Henry Ruggs is there, although I'm not as high on him as others, I think what he can bring to the offense is just too much to pass up on. But I'm a huge Javon Kinlaw fan. I think that he can be the best defensive lineman out of this class, even better than Derek Brown. I think he offers up a little bit more versatility than Derek Brown as a run defender, as a pass rusher, even as in defensive linemen. I think that you can even put him out as wide as a 7 technique, and depending on the scheme, and have him see success. But I think that looking at the need for the receiver, looking at the guys that Broncos have on the defensive line, I think I'd definitely be leaning wide receiver a little bit more, because I don't think that Javon Kinlaw is best as the nose tackle, which is the one area that the Broncos really can look to upgrade. And if you're drafting Kinlaw, then you're putting Jones back on the bench, and I don't think Denver wants to do that.
John Mortensen jumps in with a $20 donation. Thank you, John. That means the world to us, man. He says, you think by signing Gordon and the tight end, the Broncos are using it to get those two to play at their true potential?
I think that's definitely a possibility, and I think that this actually screams more towards Drew Lock, is that they want to do everything they can to take the pressure off of him. They want to run the ball, getting that blocking tight end, and Nick Vannett. I think that he would definitely he will help there. And Melvin Gordon, he's going to help the running game a little bit, offer up that receiver out of the backfield as well. It's all moves to help Drew Lock, and it's helping take pressure off of him, which is, of course, the focus that this whole offseason has been about.
Justin jumps in, one of our Super Chat superstars. Appreciate that donation, J-Bone. He says, I'm not understanding some of these signings. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. And Eric, he brings up a fair point, because my feeling on the Broncos offseason thus far, from, let's say, the A.J. Bouye trade up until the Melvin Gordon acquisition, was all positive. There wasn't really anything I could be too critical about. It was all in the plus column. But these last two moves, both of them are replete with some question marks, although a lot less so with Nick Vannett. But still, Justin has a fair point. Your thoughts?
I think that what John Elway has done in the trade market and his re-signings and his uses of the franchise tag, I absolutely love it. What he's done is on the free agent market, not so much. I like Jeff Driscoll, but I think that the money he got was a little bit much than he needed. I would have liked to see a better veteran option there that can definitely come in and help Drew Lock a little bit more than Jeff Driscoll can. Not a fan of Melvin Gordon, as we talked about. I'm not hating on the Nick Vannett signing. I just don't see that it was really a need for it. It was a must move. So that's just kind of the thing to look at there. Is I like every other move he's made except for the free agent signings. And part of that also plays into the whole compensatory pick formula as well.
Bleeds Orange and Blue jumps in with a $10 donation. Appreciate you, brother. He says, no comment, just appreciate your work. Make sure to catch the live pod. Love me some Trickles takes. Good to see you, my friend. Appreciate you. We're starting to get a little bit long, so let's wind it down, grab a couple more questions, and then we'll hop out of here for tonight. Let's see what James has to say. Eric, if all the big three receivers are off the board when Denver picks, so ostensibly Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, how would you attack the draft? How would a modest trade down plus targeting Cesar Ruiz, the center from Michigan, stack up?
I think it would really depend on how far down you're moving, what you're getting, and all that stuff. I mean, with that's really what it comes down to. If all three are gone, it'll also depend on who else is left on the board. I think that if you're sitting at 15, those three receivers are gone, and Javon Kinlaw is still there, even though I did talk about moving Jones down to the depth chart if you get Javon Kinlaw. I think that's still the way you have to go, because he reminds me so much of Chris Jones, and that's all if his knee checked out medically, which I've heard it did. Looking at other things, I mean, just maybe if Isaiah Simmons is there, but if all three of those receivers are gone at this point, I think that the four tackles might be gone by that point. I think you could be looking at one of the four big quarterbacks coming off. So I think that you could really fleece a team trying to move up. I think that the New England Patriots sit at 23. So I think that if they're wanting to move up for a quarterback, maybe Justin Herbert falls there, maybe Jordan Love is there. You try and fleece them for some extra picks. And getting Cesar Ruiz, I would absolutely love it. I mean, you would get a guy in the first round. You have 5 years of him of a concrete center for the Broncos. But I just question, does John Elway value center enough? Right. And does Mike Munchak sign off on that with how much he likes Patrick Morris?
Jeff Cohen jumps in, $5 donation. Appreciate you, bro. He says, hope we focus on offense with quality players this season, not just checking boxes off with Medicare players to fill holes. Hashtag Broncos West, hashtag state of being. Jeff, we appreciate you, my friend. And I think that's a sentiment, we can all share. The Broncos need to turn the ship around. It starts with the offense. You've got your coaching expertise. It's on the defensive side of the ball. That can make up for less than perfect conditions personnel-wise, when you're weighing things. Offensively is where this team needs a real shot, and they took a massive step forward with Drew Lock. We saw Cortland Sutton take a massive step forward in year 2. There's a good chance Noah Fant does the same thing in year 2 for him, which will be 2020. Then you inject Pat Shurmur into that equation. Now you just got to stack a couple other positions, and it could be really interesting. Eric, Maurice had a question here. He says, Chad, why can't I donate? My friend, if you're on YouTube, which looks like you are, where you comment, there's a little money sign there if you want to do it. But don't feel like you have to do it, man. Just having you part of the conversation is cool for Eric and I. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us here. And we'll grab one or two more, Eric, and then, oh, my goodness. Bleeds orange and blue off the top rope, dude. That's truly humbling. My friend, that means the world to us. Seriously, that's phenomenal. And, I mean, sometimes I just get at a loss for words, Eric, how much our listeners and our great fans in Broncos country support this channel, support these podcasts. It's just phenomenal, dude. He says, how do you guys handle the super chat? Do you split it amongst the MHH boys? Does it go straight to the host? Yeah, it goes to the hosts. So it's an equal share to the hosts is how we do it, man. And that really means the world to us. Thank you very much, Bleeds Orange and Blue. And if you're on Twitter, let me know who you are so that we can shout you out after this podcast. All right, guys, one or two more, and then we got to get out of here. Blake Williams wants to know, $2 donation. He says, what do you guys think of Darnay Holmes? Thank you for the donation, Blake. Eric, I'll let you take this one.
Darnay Holmes reminds me a lot of Chris Harris, but he does like to get a little bit grabby the farther downfield he gets. Slightly undersized, might be limited to a nickel role in the NFL. Like his play, likes to be physical throughout his routes, which leads to the grabbing and the other issues he has. Not sure if Denver will look his way for a few reasons stuff that I've heard going around, but he's definitely a guy that I like on the field. One concern, though, is that at the Senior Bowl, he really struggled, so that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Okay. Maurice figured it out. Jumps in, $5 donation. Appreciate you, bro. You didn't have to do that. We appreciate it. He says, this is late because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't donate, but never under any circumstance lose to the Raiders. That is all. LOL. Great work, guys. I know, man. It's like – and Eric's saying, look, he understands it, and so do I. It's like on one hand, you're wishing you could have better draft position today, but at the same time, you don't want to lose to the Raiders, and you sure as hell don't want to lose to the Raiders at home. And I think the silver lining is you just hope that having the Broncos finish on a purely positive note, winning 4 of their final 5 games, and giving Drew Lock that momentum, ultimately, Eric, is worth more to this team heading into 2020 than 3, 4, 5 spots in draft position.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I love that Denver beat them. I mean, the final game against the Oakland Raiders, Denver beat them. That's something to take a lot of pride in. But as an analyst, part of it that I look at is that I got to go and take a look at things about how to make this roster better, how to get back to being competitive. And that's how I approach things with this. And I just view it as losing to the Raiders, as much as that would have sucked as being a fan of the team, that going and getting that 10th overall pick would have been much better for the Broncos long term than getting that win.
Stu had a $3 donation on Super Chat with this question. Thank you, Stu. He says, what about Ron Leary? Cut him and sign another offensive lineman. Stu, in case you missed it, brother, what happened with Ron Leary is the Broncos have already moved on from Ron Leary. He had a team option this year, and the Broncos chose not to pick up that option, which rendered him a free agent. He's gone. He's gone. They have his replacement already in the form of Graham Glasgow. And hey, Buana, it's good to see you, buddy. Remember, guys, we're live every day. once a week, or not once a week. We're live every day, one day for each day in the week. 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. You're going to get a live podcast. Until the draft, you're going to have a Dove Valley Deep Divers pod both Friday and Saturday. Otherwise, you've got Huddle Up pod Monday night, 6 Mountain, 8 Eastern. Tuesday night is Building the Broncos. Then Zach and I return with Huddle Up Wednesday, Thursday. And then Eric and Lance Friday, Saturday till the draft. And then after the draft, we'll kind of re-examine what to do with the podcast programming. And, of course, we will keep you guys up to date and in the loop on any decisions we make programming-wise after the draft. Justin jumps in as we're getting ready to say goodnight to everybody with a $5 donation. Thank you, Justin. He says, I'm late jumping on to give some support. Going to spare you in the chat my rant about the signing yesterday. I like the tight end we got today, though. Good blocking. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is it was kind of a weird move grabbing Nick Vannett, but he's not a bad player, and the value was solid, Eric.
Yeah, and just like with Gordon is I don't hate the player, it's the contract. With Vannett, I don't hate the player. I do have issues with the contract, but just knowing that they can cut Jeff Heuerman and actually come out ahead in the cap just makes me be a little bit more accepting with that contract. Still don't see the whole need of it all, but hey, what can you do? I mean, at least it's a move to try and help them out long term and right away even.
Buana, I don't know why you're having a hard time. I know you always watch on YouTube. And I don't know. I mean, maybe try clicking the bell for notifications on Mile High Huddle on YouTube. Maybe that'll help. I'm not sure what it is. It's good to see you. That's now that you mention it. You know, this is a topic amongst YouTube channels and creators like us that you hear, especially political channels. They say people they're not getting their notifications when we go live. They're not seeing our content in their news stream, in their news feed, or even some people getting mysteriously unsubscribed. I've not heard one report yet of one of our great listeners or subscribers suddenly unsubscribed. But the only thing I could say, Buana, is to try and hit the bell. And that way you get notified anytime a video gets uploaded or we're going live. Other than that, just know the time frame, right? You know that no matter what, each and every day, unless you get an announcement, you're going to get a podcast between 6 o'clock Mountain to 7 o'clock Mountain. In that window, which is 8 to 9 Eastern, you're going to have a podcast. So even if that means just going straight into the channel on YouTube and clicking videos and refreshing that till it's there, till we're live, whatever, then you won't miss. But it's good to see you, bro. And obviously at the end here, you'll have to rewatch the video. But good conversation. Guys, that's going to do it for today's episode of Dove Valley Deep Divers. Thank you for joining us, each and every one of you. Your contributions to this conversation make us love joining you each and every night. This isn't work for us. This is pure passion and fun. And again, we've been on this podcast, Eric, 52 minutes now, and it really does feel like 5-10 minutes, dude. It's just so fun.
Yeah, one thing I like to do while I do this is I look up at the timer for us, and then I look down at the time, knowing what time we go live, and just like it really doesn't. It really seems like 15 minutes ago we just started, that we were just talking about just giving our opening greetings and talking about the Nick Vannett signing and our thoughts on that and everything. And just time flies when you're having fun, I guess is what they say.
And guys, mile high salute to all of our Super Chat superstars and the love you guys showed us today, especially Bleeds Orange and Blue, and your generosity that meant a lot to us, to everybody. And for those of you, listen, it might not be feasible to support the show financially through Super Chat, and that's okay. Just being a part of it means the world to us. There are organic things you can do to help support. Like if you're watching this, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, we're also going to start streaming this onto Twitch. Just as long as you like it, share it out. If you like the content, share it out. These are organic ways to support the show. You can go to Huddle Up Pod, look at merch, and every little bit counts. Bleeds Orange and Blue. Again, dude, jumping back in. You're the man. At Bleeds Orange and Blue. Okay, you're going to be getting a tag after this podcast once we end the transmission. So appreciate you, my friend. That means the world to us. In the meantime, guys, make sure you're following the main account for Dove Valley Deep Divers on Twitter at DVDD_pod. Also, you're going to want to, while you're at it, make sure you're following the mother account at Mile High Huddle. You can see here how to follow Erick Trickel at Erick Trickel, Mind the K in Eric, myself at Chad and Jensen. And then here's what to expect, guys. Eric's off till next week. We'll see if maybe we can get him on the show on Huddle Up Pod. But Zach and I will be returning together tomorrow night, usual time, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. And we'll see what we have to talk about then. I'm dying to hear what Zach thinks of these last couple of moves. Melvin Gordon, oh man, he's gonna freaking go crazy on that. And then also, of course, Nick Vannett. So we look forward to that. Have a great finish to your weekend, guys. Stay safe. If you're out and about, make sure you're washing your hands regularly. Try not to touch your face, and hold down the fort. Hopefully, we're all going to be through this whole COVID-19 deal in no time flat. Using the Trump administration, the CDC 15-day window. Hopefully by this time next week, the cloud of this is beyond us, and we're all looking forward to celebrating by watching some sports this summer and getting back to normalcy. But stay safe, guys. Stay healthy. We'll see you tomorrow night on Huddle Up Pod. For Erick Trickel, I'm Chad Jensen. Talk to you then.
You've been listening to the Huddle Up Podcast. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.